Hi, today I'm going to illustrate the various straight line tools of TurboCAD Platinum 2025. These are 2D drawing tools. Keep in mind, I am using TurboCAD Platinum, sometimes called TurboCAD Pro Platinum 2025, but many of these drawing tools are going to be found in like TurboCAD Deluxe, TurboCAD Pro, TurboCAD Designer, and maybe even other year versions of TurboCAD. But because I am using TurboCAD Platinum 2025, I can't guarantee that these tools are all going to be in your version of TurboCAD. But before I do that, I'm going to show you the units that I'm using if you wanted to follow along using the same units. And so up here where our drop down menus are, we're going to go to options, and down where it says drawing setup, we're going to go a little bit farther to space units. And for under scale, we're going to, well, first of all, I am in the United States, so I'm going to use English. For scale and type, I'm going to use absolute monospace. I want to make sure that's set to 1 equals 1. For my units, I want to make sure that is on inch. I want my line width units to be millimeter. I'm going to make sure my precision is set to 6. My area units is going to be set to inches, and then I'm going to click OK to accept these values. And so the first tool we're going to look at is just simply called line. Line allows us to pick a start point, pick an end point, we have a line. Pick a start point, pick an end point, we have a line. As a secondary function of that tool, we can type in very precise coordinates for both our end point and start point. And so how I do that is, if you look down here where the status bar is, what gives us information about interacting with the various tools we have active, way over on the right side, we have snap, geo, and then we have a text field with some number in it for X, Y, and Z. These are coordinate fields for the X-axis, Y-axis, and Z-axis. Right now, because we're only working in 2D, we're going to ignore the Z-axis. As you can see here, it's already set to 0. We're not going to worry about that. But I'm going to hit tab, and I'm going to have to tab about 3 times. And I'm going to, in this X-axis coordinate field, I'm going to type 0. And then I'm going to tab into the Y-axis coordinate field, hit 0, and I'm going to hit enter. That allowed us to specify a very precise coordinate at 0, 0. We're going to talk about object snaps in a later video, but I want to illustrate one thing by coming down here to the status bar and right-clicking on snap. If you wanted to draw a line that is perfectly straight, horizontal, or vertical, there is a snap mode that allows us to latch on to that perfectly straight, horizontal, or vertical called ortho mode. As you can see right now, because this box is unchecked, it is turned off. But if I wanted to turn that on, I would check mark it and click OK, and it turns that on. Another thing, I would have to make sure this no snap is turned off. What no snap is, when that is check marked, it temporarily, or until you deselect that, until you unselect that, it turns all your snaps off. And so if that is check marked, all your snaps is going to be turned off. And I want to make sure no snap is deselected, but I want to make sure ortho mode is check marked, and then click OK. And now you can see here my line is stuck on being vertical and horizontal. If you don't want that, you right click on snap, and then you deselect that, click OK, and you can turn that off. Now you can draw at any angle you want. And so at this point, I have a couple options. I can type in another coordinate by tabbing in over to my X and Y coordinate fields, and I can type 0 and then tab over into Y and type in something like 10. And I just drew a line that is 10 inches by typing in a precise coordinate. Another way I can do things is I can specify a coordinate for my start point. This time I'm going to draw one at 5x, 5y. And now I can click in this length field here. Well, I can actually tab into it. And now, if I wanted to, I can type a very specific length, like maybe I want my line to be 6.5 inches. And maybe I want that line to be at a 45-degree angle. And so I hit enter or return. And now I had a line that was drawn 6.5 inches at 45 degrees. And my start point was precisely at 5.5 inches. I mean 5, 5. 5 in the X, 5 in the Y. And so the line tool is very versatile in that you can pick points on the screen. You can type in very specific coordinates. You can even specify a length and an angle. The next line tool we're going to look at is this one called perpendicular. What this tool does is allow us to draw a line that is perpendicular to another line that we reference. And so this last line that I had just drawn, that was drawn at a 45-degree angle, I'm going to reference that line. I'm going to select perpendicular, make sure that tool is active. I'm going to reference that line. Notice it latched onto that line, but keep in mind that I don't actually have to start this perpendicular line on that line. It will allow me to start this new line at a point that is off that line that we are referencing, but it's still going to be perpendicular. So if I click, I just place my start point. I'm not on the line that I referenced, but I'm still perpendicular to that line. So I can click another point to define the line. And again, I can also type in a very precise value for the length of the line. I can come over here, reference this line. I can maybe pick a precise point on the line. And then if I want this line to be a precise value, may I want it to be 7.8 inches. I'm going to tab 7.8. And even with the perpendicular line, you can specify a precise length. Likewise, there's also a tool here called parallel. Just like perpendicular, parallel, we reference another line. So I'm going to reference this line. And I can just click a point to place it, or I'm going to reference that line again. I can type in an offset value. So if I want this to be offset maybe 4 inches from the line that I reference, I can tab into the offset field, type in 4, hit enter, and I have a line that is offset exactly 4 inches. A secondary option of the offset tool is I'm going to reference this line right here. Not only can I specify an offset value, I'm going to type in 5, but I'm going to type in length. I can also type in a length for this new line. So maybe I want this new line to be 10 inches. And so I'm going to hit enter to accept those values. And so I'm going to hit my space bar to enter into the select mode, and then click on that line that I just created here. And that line was 5 inches offset from the line that we referenced, but we also specified the length of that line. The next line we're going to take a look at is something called bisector. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the line command, the regular line command, and I'm just going to draw 2 lines that are in like a V formation. What this bisector line does, it allows us to reference 2 lines, and they don't always have to be in a V formation. And then it will draw a line, it will calculate, it'll reference, like in this case, it's going to reference the point of the V formation, but it's going to draw a line that is directly halfway between those lines, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to reference my first line, and then I'm going to reference my second line, and then it asks me to select a third point, and I'm just going to click inside this V here. And now, just like with the offset and perpendicular, I can either pick a point on the screen for my endpoint, or I can tab into the length and type in a precise value. I'm going to type in 1.75. And so what that did is it drew a line referencing those other 2 lines that were in a V formation, and drew a line that is directly halfway between those. And just to illustrate again that don't always have to be a V formation, I'm going to draw 2 lines using the regular line tool in an X formation. Now I'm going to go back to this bisector, and I'm going to click my 2 lines. And now I'm going to click. Notice in this X pattern, it's giving me, showing temporary points markers to tell me where I'm referencing. And so I'm going to start my bisector over here in this part of the X. So I'm going to click here, and notice it started my bisector line there. And so what I'm trying to illustrate is your lines don't have to be in a V formation. You can have lines that are in an X formation. And then the third point tells it where you want to reference to start your bisector line. And again, you can type in a precise value or click somewhere on the screen. The next lines we're going to look at are straight lines, but they reference circles. And we're not going to go into circles in this video, but I'm just going to place some circles on the screen here, just randomly, to illustrate those line segments. We will talk about circles later on. But the next line is going to be tangent. Tangent arc point. What this lines tool does is allows us to pick a point. Well, basically we're referencing a circle or an arc line to draw a straight line that is perpendicular to that circle and arc. And so it's when you activate that tangent arc point, it's going to tell you to click an arc, click next to an arc. That would also include circles. Even though it doesn't say circles, I can click on the circle and it'll let me reference that item. And where I clicked on that circle or arc is going to be the main point of that line. If I click another point, I'm specifying one of the endpoints of the line. What this now does is the first time you click, you're referencing a circle or arc to make a straight line tangent to that arc. Basically, you're selecting the object you're referencing. The second point you click just specifies like how long that line is, like where one of the endpoints are. The third point that we're going to click is our position. And so we're going to do that again with another circle here, but this time we're going to specify some precise values. So I'm going to reference this circle. This time, for a length, I want my line to be 5 inches long, and hit 5, enter. Oh, I forgot to tab. We're going to undo and redo that because I forgot to tab into the angle field. So we're going to click on a circle to reference. We're going to tab into the length field here. Not only can I specify the length, but I can specify an angle. And so I'm going to specify that this line is 45 degrees in reference to my circle. And so what this 45 degree is doing, if I escape out of that for a moment here, if it will let me, not letting me, maybe I have to do that again, but I'm going to specify, click a point to specify the length here. Notice this, there's a dotted line that is perpendicular to the line. And so when you specify an angle, when you're using this tangent line, the angle that you type in is the perpendicular of that line you're drawing. And so I can type in a length, I can type in 5 inches, and then I'm going to type in 45 degrees. When you type in an angle, you're not typing in the angle of the line, but you're typing in the angle of the reference of the perpendicular reference to your line that you're creating, which is referencing the circle. So I'm going to delete a couple of these straight lines here for right now. And then the next tool that I'm going to work with is tangent to arc or curve. What this tool does is allows us to specify a random point, like a start point, basically what we're doing, and then for the end point, it's going to allow us to reference an arc or circle to make our line, the endpoint of the line, be tangent to an arc or circle. So I click to specify my start point, and the start point for this tool, you reference the arc or circle when you're referencing your endpoint. And so I'm going to reference this circle, and what it did is my endpoint is on that circle, but it's tangent to that circle, and it also can be an arc. And that was the tangent to arc or circle. If we want the start point to be on the circle and tangent to the circle or arc, the next tool is going to mirror that. And this is tangent from arc or circle. And so now, for this tool, we want to click on an arc and circle because the start point needs to reference an arc and circle. And so when I click once on the, notice I'm referencing the arc, the circle in this case, it can be an arc. The second point I choose is going to be the endpoint of that line, but I can also specify by tabbing into length, I can specify a length, and I can also specify an angle. Maybe I can specify 235. And so many of these line tools, you can just click a random point on a screen, but many of the tools allow you to specify precise angles, lengths, and even coordinate values. The next tool we're going to take a look at is called tangent to two arcs. And these can also be circles. I'm demonstrating circles, but these can also be arc. And so what tangent to two arc does is this time, instead of referencing only one circle or arc, we're going to reference two circles or two arcs or an arc in a circle. So I'm going to click this arc, this circle, and then click the second circle, and now I have a line that is tangent to both of those circles. And so I can do the other side of these circles. I can click this circle and then click the other circle. And later on, when you're working in TurboCAD, you'll realize that's one way you can draw a shape. Like I can edit this with the trim tool to make that like a slot looking type of a shape. And then let me see here. Alright, the last tool we're going to look at is called minimal distance. What minimal distance does is, like the last tool, we reference two arcs or two circles or an arc and a circle, but it calculates a line that is the shortest distance between those two objects. So I'm going to click this circle, and it calculated the two. It drew a line connecting those two circles or referencing those two circles. The endpoints are on those two circles, but that's the shortest distance between those two circles. And just to illustrate that these objects do not have to be circles all the time, I'm going to draw some arcs. On the screen here. I'm going to remove some of these objects on the screen, clean this up a little bit so you can see better. And then I'm going to go back to minimal distance here. And so these are arcs. They're not full circles, but I can still reference these objects. So I'm going to reference the two arcs, and it calculated a minimal distance line. Just like the circles, I can do tangent to two arcs. I can also reference an arc and a circle. And so these are really versatile straight line tools. And so there's a lot you can do with these line tools. That's one thing I have always enjoyed about TurboCAD when working with 2D drawings is there's just, some people would say it's a little bit of redundancy, but there's a lot of tools and you can create almost any shape you would ever need. And so it might seem like a little bit of redundancy, but these tools come in handy. In the next video, we're going to take a look at circular line segments like arcs and circles. We'll probably do circles first and then go on to arcs.